027, sex, hooking up. Got your attention, right? This is always a controversial and fascinating subject, and by varying degrees, we are all driven by our sexuality. Sexuality is our sense of sexual awareness and identity. Sexuality is a deep-rooted component to our identity, either by its abundance or by its lack. Hypersexual people need to manage impulses and tendencies, and so do asexuals, people indifferent to sex. Sex is a big part of our identities. It's how we all got here. It's a big part of our mentalities, and it is an infused feature of our human culture. We're going to take a look at both ends of the spectrum, the more apparent and obvious sexual obsession fixation mentality, hypersexual, as well as the less obvious avoidant disinterested sex mentality, asexual. Hypersexual. Any desire that overly dominates our thinking and time is unhealthy and needs to be regulated, managed, and examined. Sexually fixated people have a default mechanism within their subconscious that categorizes and separates everyone they interact with into sexual categories of would-dos and would-not-dos. Hypersexual people are subconsciously motivated to interact with people based on this. Not only if they will interact with them, but how. Flirty, platonic, suggestive, distant. There is a convenient lack of conscious awareness of interaction style. The subconscious craftily and discreetly influences behaviors to keep the intent obscured. By being consciously ignorant to our own behaviors, we can find ourselves in sexual circumstances by accident and not on purpose. It just happens. This insulates the hypersexual from accountability, and without accountability, the subconscious can sustain addictive behaviors. Hypersexual people need to become hyper-aware of their interaction tendencies to successfully thwart the hypersexual subconscious. The sex impulse. The most common motivation behind hypersexuality is an attempt to compensate for a sense of deficient value. We live in a culture in which fashion and status can be used to gain acceptance and validation, but sex is way more accessible and available to nearly almost everyone. Many folks lack the resource to buy a sporty attention-getting car or wardrobe to impress others, but nearly everyone has genitalia and can perform sexually one way or another. Promiscuity is used to gain what hypersexual people are missing emotionally from their subconscious expectations of relationships. It is an attempt to compensate for something lacking. When this deficiency is temporarily fulfilled through artificial or superficial means, intense feelings of regret and shame follow. Even when an individual realizes he or she is in the addictive loop of artificial fulfillment and shame, it is too late to simply make a conscious effort to cease the behavior, hence the term addiction. Complex avoidance and denial mechanisms are in place. Like drugs, when the individual becomes consciously aware he or she may regret a sexual encounter, the person is still compelled to pursue it, since nearly anything seems a better alternative to feeling the lonely worthlessness that is being felt at the moment. In other words, even if the person is aware he or she may soon feel intense regret and shame, it is seen as worth it until after. Promiscuity is often private and discreet, yet a reputation is easily earned because the power of gossip is pervasive in society. It is easy to gain a reputation even when it's untrue, to say nothing for really doing it. Sex addicts typically keep their shame and regret private. Sex addicts compensate for feelings of shame and regret by taking pride in their conquest, so their promiscuity appears deliberate, not as a pathology driven by feelings of inadequacy. No one feels proud or justified as an easy sexual target. If you are promiscuous and you disagree, you've got work to do. Sexuality is a far too intimate and personal character feature, and it is not possible to be excessive in it without emotional cost. All excessive behaviors, from cookies to drugs and sex, come with emotional and psychological cost, and the more powerful, personal, and intimate the behavior, the higher the cost. I was thoroughly convinced that my sexual needs were merely male hormonal tendencies and desires to feel pleasure. Like many males, I thought of sex a lot and took whatever opportunity I could get to fulfill it or explore it. It took a very long time to realize that I would make compromises to my own character simply to get laid. The hotter a girl was and the more sexually talented she was, the more I would tolerate bad personality or character, especially since it seemed that the more damaged someone was in personality or character, the more talented and sexually driven they likely were. It made perfectly logical sense to me to take advantage of these circumstances. Who doesn't buy an item they want when it's 50% off? I remained in dysfunctional relationships with women I could not get along with emotionally or spiritually simply because I was unwilling or unable to give up the sexual component. It was a misguided need for carnal fulfillment and intense experience. I felt I was trying to access, like with drugs, anything that was beyond the mundane parameters of human experience. Sexual union was conducive to my passionate need for the extraordinary, the intense, and the above and beyond. I did not think I was compensating for emotional or psychological needs that were missing, but for exaltation and transcendence. I was trying to fulfill my need for purpose and meaning in a mundane existence. Deep, huh? Senseless, rationalizing, utter BS. My sexual compulsions were not realized by a rock bottom moment of clarity, but when I met someone of quality and was motivated and inspired to be true, honest, and chaste. I wasn't suddenly transformed into an ethical, moral man. I was desperate to impress and sustain a relationship with this person. I was in love. I knew I would lose this person if I transgressed sexually, and I was not willing to do my own undoing again. More on how I changed my sexually addictive ways coming up. 15 years later, and we're still together. Parameters and disciplines will be required to break the cycle. It is easier to abstain from drug use than it is to abstain from a socially encouraged and exploited behavior like sex. Let's face it, social culture does more than encourage sex. It helps create and sustain it, unlike drugs, which are ostracized by conventional society. Magazines, movies, music, all use gorgeously fit and symmetrically perfect models to portray anything they sell. Social media is used to project sex. These elements of society are integral components of our perceptions of self-worth. Of course, the public media machine argues that they are only portraying what the people want and pay for. We don't create it, they argue. We are simply the symptom of the disease, not the disease itself, and they are partially accurate. It is a symbiotic relationship. One feeds on the other and vice versa. We all want to be beautiful and rich. That's the disease, but it's a natural disease. Pop culture magazines have pages and pages of high-gloss, full-color photos of physically proportionate, attractive people, captured in images portraying them having fun, living in luxury, and having love too. The message is clear. If you do not have the good life, it must be because you're not thin enough, dressed well enough, or wearing the right makeup. Buy this to fix it. It's a simple message to understand, and the media culture is absolved because they aren't saying anything. It's all inferred. This isn't done to intentionally undermine anyone. It's designed to make a profit. The media culture would depict images of insecurity and despair with horribly ugly models if it would sell product. We want to believe that what will free us from mediocrity is a material formula. Weight loss surgery, a new car, or high cheekbones will liberate us from our unfulfilling lives. We want to believe what they're selling. We ask for more by making it all reach a healthy bottom line. There is no identifiable genesis of this media disease. Both the host, us, and the virus, media, are integral and coexist. Either way is an academic point and not very relevant to what needs to be done anyway. Sex addicts need to get well first and only think later of how to contribute to the eradication of the disease itself. What to do? A sexual addict must learn how to validate from within and learn how to appreciate themselves and feel valuable. We should also be concerned with how quality people perceive us. The ratio of self-validation to external validation should be 70% self-validation, 25% external. It is easy to suggest we should never care what others think of us, but that is totally incorrect. Caring how others perceive us makes us care and take pride in our appearances, hygiene, personalities, and characters. If we literally do not care what others think, this world would be messy and dangerous, as no one would care about hurting others or taking care of themselves. Vanity in the right proportion is a virtue. Vanity in the wrong proportion is a vice. If we are vain, we need to reduce it, and if we are insecure, we need to increase it to feel more secure. Being self-secure is a tall order, and we are all attempting this in every waking moment in our own way. So let's break sexual recovery into stages, build a blueprint, and discuss the healing along with the stages so the big picture goal becomes apparent along the way. Media diet. Put yourself on a well-regulated media diet. We cannot get rid of media exposure or be completely media absent unless we withdraw from the world altogether, which is overkill and unhealthy. Therefore, to stabilize our thinking and self-esteem, we should have minimal exposure to media input and regulate it. We do not want to judge the interests of others, so we should discreetly create distance between ourselves and media without being vocal about it. Modify your lifestyle without criticizing others. If you don't like the superficial content of a TV show the room of friends is watching, don't watch it, but skip being vocal about your new perceptions. Feel a commercial is dumb, offensive, and using sex to sell? Keep it to yourself. If someone else points it out, passively agree, but refrain from contributing to the conversation. Take a walk or some other non-attention getting distraction. Don't watch any of it when alone, either to be entertained or to judge, which is just another way of being entertained by it. The sexual images and content of all forms of media, subtly or overtly, activate the hypersexual mind. Less input will result in less output. Hypersexuality recovery requires private, intense meditation and acceptance. It takes a lot of work to be able to honestly admit to ourselves that we have this issue. Realization and meditation are required until shame is experienced to a degree that we become highly motivated and willing to suffer for our evolution and progress. The trick is to feel shame without judgment. Having an issue, pathology, or vulnerability does not make us bad people, deserving to be judged by others or ourselves. It's not an issue of morality, it's an issue of sustaining our principles. If promiscuity is against our principles, then let the shame in without judgment. Spend time sincerely contemplating and thinking of your sexual attitudes and experiences. Revisit some personal occurrences in detail, reliving the events and emotions leading up to specific events. Give extra time to the honest, emotional, not physical, feelings had during the encounter and the ensuing after effects, including short-term, immediate after, mid-term, soon after, and long-term, following day, week, etc., and any consequences, disease risk, friendship risk, or betrayals, embarrassments, etc. Do not allow yourself to avoid the feelings that are uncomfortable. Instead, zero in on those specifically to analyze and explore them. Do this not with judgment, but with objective observation. Remember, shame is an indication our minds provide us to assist us, not to punish us. It's how we learn. This stage does not conclude. It is an ongoing feature of recovery and management. We need to develop awareness that will allow us to perceive ourselves at the onset of tendencies rather than after the fact. Practice makes perfect, so we need to discipline ourselves to do this uncomfortable, sometimes punishing, if you're doing it right, introspection. We cannot rely on ourselves to do it when we get the time or circumstances. We cannot simply say, well, we'll think it over 4 times a day. Think it over when, what time. We need to be specific and make a plan to do this work, or else we will avoid it. The lack of a detailed plan, discipline for this work is a symptom of the addiction and how it protects itself. Spend 15 to 20 minutes throughout each day to do this shame work. It is the most challenging work an addict will ever do and is proportionate to its healing power. Attain support and protection from yourself. We can be our own worst enemies, so try to enlist a few trusted friends or family members who will hold you accountable. Their role can be one of interference when you are showing signs of hooking up or are actually in the process of it. Excuse me, I need to borrow my friend a while. He'll be right back. Maybe. Supportive people should gracefully and respectfully interfere to frustrate and possibly ruin the hookup possibility. Supportive friends should be instructed to interfere and may even insist you leave with them to remove you from temptation opportunities. Time off. Time off from tempting social environments is needed. If social scenes, bars, clubs, get-togethers, parties, and the like are your regular social lifestyle, time off should be implemented. Maybe 3 months, 90+ days of no parties, bars, clubs, or other hookup scenes or casual get-togethers. Total isolation is not required. Socializing in platonic, intimate get-togethers, small groups of close, trusted friends where sexual attraction is not a dynamic, let alone a temptation. Much has already been elaborated on the 30, 60, 90 days of absence, and it applies here too.
Time off needs to be accompanied by recovery work of self-exploration, introspection, and the others listed in this and other chapters. How time is spent over the 110 days is pertinent. This is an opportunity to show our subconscious that there are real benefits to living differently. It may not be all good, but we should try to exploit the time off by planning circumstances or events that are fun and fulfilling. Learn how to spend time alone or without the easily accessed social distractions. Choose quality of people and time spent over quantity.
A period of complete sexual abstinence is required. The most ideal is the 110-day period. If this is repeatedly compromised, implement the gradated formula. Cut sexual activity in half. Average out the amount of sexual situations you regularly have and minimally cut it by half. After 2 weeks, cut it in half again. After 2 more weeks, do it again and work your way up to the 110 days of total abstinence. Slow progress is better than none, to say the least. Your existing sexual partners might be confused, hurt, rejected, or resentful at your sudden absence from them. A serious choice must be made to tell or not to tell. The upside to telling your reasons for being sexually unavailable is they will certainly get the point and are less likely to take it as a rejection. The downside is that some partners and friends may ramp up their attempts to seduce you, by enticing or guilting you, subconscious attempts to avoid their own feelings of rejection and inadequacy. Sexual absence is new territory, which makes us vulnerable, so we cannot say with any certainty how we will feel or respond to abstinence. Avoid predicting how you'll take it. Assume it will be hard. We're doing this because we've been unable to manage sexual temptations and pressures externally or internally, so let's not suddenly rely on willpower now. It is helpful to enlist someone as a mentor, sponsor, through your initial recovery, someone you can rely on, someone who is comfortable enough to tell you when you're acting out, and someone who you're willing to listen to when they do. It is unwise to trust yourself with sexual decisions, but it's also unwise to trust your choices of who to entrust as a mentor of your new goals and behaviors. Your addiction is a covert influence to your decision mechanisms, persuading you to believe the best mentor supporter is the haughty friend you have a secret lust for. The qualifications of those who can be trusted as supporter mentors are as follows. No sexual history or attraction whatsoever. No one of the opposite sex or the same sex if you're homosexual. People who know you. Only friendships with a long history and consistency are qualified. People you've been in touch with somewhat regularly for years. There are many forms of sex, and sex with a partner is only one style of participating in hypersexuality. Masturbation and voyeurism are two of many that come to mind. If you're being honest with introspection, you know what you do to satiate hypersexual impulses. Time off needs to include temporary cessation of alternative ways of getting the sex fix as well. Masturbation is the most common way we may try to satiate ourselves without actually having sex. The subconscious will attempt to give us a false sense of accomplishment and pride if we successfully minimize sexual actions to only masturbation. Like alcoholics who go to a bar but don't get drunk and say they're just going to socialize and to learn how to control themselves the hard way so they'll have stronger control in the long run. By deliberately exposing ourselves to our vices, we are rationalizing our involvement so we can eventually have our weak moment guilt-free. Whatever sexual habits you have need to be included in your sexual abstinence break period. This includes masturbation. Once the abstinence phase is complete, it is time to slowly reintroduce sexual habits in a conventional, moderate amount. Healthy non-addicts do indeed have sex, so it can be, and in my opinion, is a healthy component to a fulfilling life. Sexual fixation is not healthy, but sexual deprivation isn't healthy either, so the goal is to have a healthy and moderate relationship with sex. Once the bond of sex addiction is broken through the abstinence phase, experimentation is needed to find the right quantity of sex in our lives that doesn't distract from life. There are wide and varying opinions of this because nearly everyone requires different amounts. Based on what I've seen in the years I've spent as a couples coach, the most beneficial, satisfying sexual frequency is in the middle of the spectrum. Every day is on one end of the spectrum, and once per month is far too on the other end. We strive for the middle. 1 to 2 interactions per week if we're in a committed relationship, 1 to 3 times per month if we're not in a relationship. In addition to this, 1 to 2 sessions of masturbation per week if we're regularly having sex in a relationship, 2 per week if we're not in a relationship. Pornography and other stimuli can be used during a session of masturbation, but not outside of one. If pornography, voyeurism, has been a feature of your sexual relationship with a partner, it should be a less dominant feature, not an essential or relied upon one. We should strengthen our sexual appetite and capacity without those tools. Our goal is to try to get as near to an organic sexual experience as possible, sans paraphernalia, tools, accessories, etc. Accessories can be a feature of our sex experience, but not a main feature or requirement. Many people may feel this is very subjective criteria, and they feel that they are different. Of course, there is some room for customizing this to each individual and relationship, but no customizing should be done until you fully explore these specific parameters first. We cannot honestly and objectively know what our needs truly are until we sample an alternative long enough to know what it does or doesn't do. So don't speculate, experiment. Sex addicts are great at experimentation, so don't just apply it to the other end of the spectrum. Sex is a glorious feature of being human. It increases connection and intimacy between two people and is a valuable, healthy expression of affection and validation. It is a great stress reliever because it releases needed endorphins and pent-up energies. It is a great source of pleasure and playful frivolity. Sexual tendencies are human nature and should be considered and respected. However, the rule against excess applies everywhere in life. If anything in our lives is excessive, it takes dominant role in our thinking and thereby limits our access to other realms of being. Sex is an opportunity to feel exaltation and pleasure that has no equivalency or similarity. Paradoxically, it is an opportunity to feel shame, embarrassment, and humiliation in the same proportions. Balance this powerful, even mystical force of human nature. Sex has quasi-spiritual potential. It can intensify your being, your emotions, your sense of self, and it is powerful in every way. It needs to be respected and approached with consideration of that power. Sex aversion is the opposite of the fixation addiction, hypersexuality. The SA, sex aversive, will avoid sex and has feelings of repugnance towards it. Yes, this is an addiction too, as someone who feels compelled to avoid sexual contact will suffer many of the same detriments that other addicts do. Social rejection, shame, embarrassment, self-loathing, and feeling deprived of common happiness accessible to others. An addict is conventionally defined as someone who participates in anything excessive, so the same definition applies here because people who are sexually aversive excessively avoid something that could provide healthy features of happiness to their lives. If a person who is sexually aversive can find a partner in life who is also sexually aversive, I suppose they could be happy. However, since this is a rare disposition, it is unlikely they will ever be able to receive the comforting benefits of a healthy, balanced give-and-take relationship for very long. Sex is a nearly essential element to the intimacy of a romantic relationship. Intimacy implying closeness, connectivity, and symbiosis. Work can be done to manage sexual aversion. Gradual stages are required that will slowly erode the existing state of aversion consciousness. Introspection and self-forgiveness. Deep, honest, introspective thinking and meditation needs to be an ongoing process, not a singular or short series of exercises. The goal is to realize self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. Let me be one of the few or only who tells you there's nothing wrong with you. There's only something wrong with you if you do not at least try to improve yourself for yourself. You did not ask to be sexually aversive, and it is not a conscious choice, so do not waste time with self-blame because it is not productive or justified. Self-forgiveness should take place first if we are going to be capable of committing to what needs to be done to improve. What am I truly trying to avoid needs to be answered. The most common insight can be misleading. It is physically uncomfortable or even painful. This sounds justifiable. However, there are many ways to experience the pleasures of sex while avoiding the particular physical actions that cause discomfort. If being penetrated or penetrating someone is painful, there are ways of having sex more gently that do not even include penetration. If someone avoids only penetration or contact with another, the aversion is going to be easier to manage. If someone avoids all forms of sex, including masturbation, then there is a total sexual aversion. Total sexual aversion may be rooted in a deeper psychological trauma and may require personal counseling or therapy to resolve or reconcile the issues. Also, the following strategies can be adapted and paced slower and be more segmented. For sexual aversives who can and do enjoy some forms of masturbation, their sexual partners need to be sensitive to avoid things SAs find uncomfortable and perform things they do enjoy until immense trust is built. The sensitive, supportive partner can be encouraged to experiment with other techniques and actions slowly and gradually. Be sure to acknowledge the supportive partner's patience and even compensate by asking him or her what you might be able to give in exchange. Everything from a home-cooked meal, washing his or her car, or oral or even manual pleasure. For the SA who's not in a relationship, a different set of growth exercises need to be explored. Experiment with different styles and techniques of masturbation and try to use visual stimuli along with it. There is no shortage of varying degrees of porn available for free on the internet. Using new masturbation techniques, alone or with trusted partners, can make all the difference. Sexual paraphernalia can be slowly experimented with to sample new things, but only gradually and when and if the SA is ready to. The tougher nut to crack here would be the aversion to intimacy. Intimacy is the emotional and mental feature of sexual union. Intimacy avoidance can be very complex and can be brought on by a myriad of causes, making it nearly impossible to responsibly explore them all here. Sexual molestation as a child, rape as an adult, or any degree of sexual humiliation or emotional trauma, including overly strict religious or zealously pious attitudes, will fuel aversion. The mind will always try to protect itself by avoiding association with anything perceived as similar to past traumas. We will go over these in a limited way because serious trauma needs serious work philosophically, therapeutically, and spiritually. A sincere and ardent search for a trained and objective counselor that you can have a good rapport with can be essential. Do not involve any untrained people or trained people with whom you have a personal relationship on any level. Not a neighbor, childhood friend, or the mailman. Only a paid professional can maintain objectivity. Slowly work through past trauma issues and add in self-discovery and reading of books and articles from trusted sources to augment therapy. No pop culture therapy like TV, radio, or mainstream books. We live in a commercialized culture, so this unfortunately means we have to weed out a lot, and sometimes the baby goes out with the bathwater. Expect sexual aversion to take substantial time to improve. You cannot hurry healing of any type, especially sexual. Once insight is gained into the cause of your aversion, a slow, strategic process of improving should be initiated. Make a thorough list of sexual discomforts, touching, intercourse, etc. Rate them from 1 to 10, 10 being the most uncomfortable. Begin by working from the easy end of the list, the ones, and continue working with them until they become zeros. Leave 10s alone. Do not risk traumatizing yourself further and resetting the issue, giving it strength. Maybe someday you'll address the 10s too. Maybe never. If the 1s and 2s take 6 months to get them to zeros, that's fine. Slow progress is better than none, and you're doing great. Hurrying will work against you. A gradual system works for intimacy issues. If you cannot relax or ease self-awareness of your insecurities, a slow, stage-by-stage process is needed. Foreplay should not be considered a mere set of physical acts. Foreplay can and should be a process of becoming more connected mentally and emotionally with our sexual partner. Conversation, dialogue, and any interaction that is not overtly sexual not only helps us become more comfortable with a partner and with our own selves, but also subtly stimulates our sexual attractions and senses through anticipation. An effective intimacy treatment is for couples to not have sex. Talking intimately and privately and being close physically with no sexual intention or agenda becomes foreplay. Simply spending time together with no expectation of sex creates intimacy, even if many of these instances end in mild discomfort or conflict. You are encouraged to participate in some physical closeness with no sexual culmination. Sitting together, watching a movie, or having dinner, or simply working closely on a chore simultaneously. Eventually, some brief and time deliberate touching or caressing interactions are experimented with, but are not allowed to culminate in sex. What we're doing here is creating subtle anticipation. Sex without anticipation is merely mechanical. Therefore, anticipation is an important element to a sexual relationship. In everyday life, the hungrier we are, the more we seem to truly enjoy our meal or dessert. Everyone's familiar with this, and we're simply transferring it to our sexuality. These exercises are not on a timeline. Do not get frustrated or lose commitment if you're not getting results quickly. Your subconscious mind knows what you're up to. It will try to sabotage your commitment in an effort to hold sexual aversion in place. These strategies will work if you give them some time. They can be modified too. Frustration is actually an indication that you are slowly wearing the sexually aversive subconscious down.
Along the way, expect arguments, conflict, discomfort, and frustration with yourself and your partner, and misinterpretation of the partner's perceptions. The SA may perceive his or her partner as impatient, judgmental, or thinking of giving up. The healthy partner's mind will conjure ideas that the SA is being passive-aggressive, punishing him or her for some other issues and trying to get attention, to say nothing of the actual feelings of sexual deprivation the partner is experiencing, because this whole process stimulates him or her but is not leading to any climax or fulfillment. Be ready for the long haul. You'll need it, and this will truly put the strength and commitment of any relationship to the test. Try to take it in stride and try to have the perspective that if the relationship is surviving at all, it is a victory and nothing less. Regularly praise, reward, and sincerely acknowledge each other's efforts and be thankful. Keep the gratitude and thanks simple and basic. If you elaborate on your feelings, you'll be at risk of eventually saying or expressing something the wrong way or having it misunderstood. Thanks for not giving up and being with me through this, and I love you is sweet, direct, and hard to misinterpret. Neither person in this equation is doing more than the other or is the better person for not giving up simply because most would. Try not to focus on your own sacrifice. Try to focus on the gratitude of having someone who is trying to overcome an awkward and unwanted dynamic for you and with you. Overall, this will, as any endured crisis can, make your relationship stronger and better.